सबका यूपीएससी टाइम में स्वागत करती हूँ। आज की वीडियो में हम एनसीईआरटी क्लास हिस्ट्री का चैप्टर 5 इयर्स ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन का लेक्चर 2 देखने वाले हैं। प्रीवियस वीडियो में हम इसके फर्स्ट स्लाइड के बारे में डिस्कस कर चुके थे। नाउ लेट्स स्टार्ट द लेक्चर 2। Industrialization in colonies, the age of the Indian textile. Before the age of machine industries, silk and the cotton goods from the India dominated an international market in a textile. Coarser cotton were produced in many countries, but the finer variety often come from India. Armenian and Persian merchants took goods from Punjab to Afghanistan, Eastern Persia and the Central Asia. Bales of time textile were carried on a camel-back via the northwest frontier through the mountain passes and across desert. A vibrant sea trade operated through the main pre-colonial ports. Surat on the Gujarat coast connected India to the Gulf and Red Sea port. Masulipatam on the Coromandel coast and Hooghly in the Bengal had trade link with the Southern Asian port. A variety of Indian merchant and banker were involved in this network to export the trade, financing production, carrying the goods and supplying exporter. They gave the advance to the weaver producing the woven clothes from the weaving village and carried the supply to the ports. The complex and complete market, the whole process of trade, basically involved three steps: financing production, carrying of the goods, support goods to the exporter, supplying merchant, linked the port town to the inland region. They gave advance to the weaver, produced the woven cloth from the weaving village and carried the supply to the port. At the port, the big shipper and export merchant had broke who negotiate the price and bought goods from the supply merchant operating the inland. The port of Surat and Hooghly declined by the end of the 18th century. Explain. Most of the European companies had huge resources, so it was very difficult for the Indian merchant and trader to face the competition. The European companies were gaining power by the securing a variety of concessions from the local courts. Some of the companies got the monopoly right to the trade. All this resulted in a decline of the old port of the Surat and the Hooghly, through which local merchant and operated exports from these ports were felt dramatically. The credit that had financed the earlier trade began drying up and the local bankers slowly went bankrupt. In the last year of the 17th century, the gross value of trade that passed through the Surat had been 16 million. By the 1740s, it has slumped to the 3 million rupees. With the passage of the time, Surat and Hooghly decayed. Bombay and the Calcutta grew. Decline of the old ports and the rise of the new ones, the European companies gradually gained power. This resulted in a decline of the old ports of the Surat and Hooghly, through which local merchant had operated. Export from these ports fell dramatically, and credit that had financed the earlier trade became drying up, and the local bankers slowly went bankrupt. While the Surat and Hooghly decayed, Bombay and the Kolkata grew. This shift from the old port to new one was an indicator of the growth of colonial power. Trade through the new ports come to the control by European companies and was carried in the European ship. The European companies gradually gained power and the monopoly rights. Trade through the new ports of the Kolkata and Mumbai came to the control by the European companies. By the 1750s, this network controlled by the Indian merchant was breaking down. Plight of the weaver. What happened to the weaver? Were adopted by companies official to ensure regular supplies of the cotton and the silk textile for the Indian weaver. When the East India Company established political power, it could assert a monopoly right to trade. It proceeded to develop a system of management and control that would eliminate competition, control cost, and ensure regular supplies of the cotton and silk goods. This was done through a series of steps. The company tried to eliminate existing trader and broker by appointing a paid servant called the Gomestha to supervise weaver, collect supplies, and examine the quality of cloth. It prevented company weaver from the dealing with the other buyer by the system of advance. Those who look advance had to hand over the cloth they produced to the Gomestha. They could not take it to the any other traders. Okay. Many weavers had small plots of land which now they had to lease out to other and devote all their time to weaving. Weaving required the labor of the entire family. Earlier supply merchants had a close relationship with the weaver. The Gomestas were outsiders. They acted arrogantly, marched into the village with the sepoy and the peons, and punished weaver for the delays in the supply, often beating the flogging them. Weaver lost a space to bargain for the prices and sell out to different buyers. The price now they received was miserably low, and the loans they had accepted tied them to the company. In many places, weaver desert villages and migrated weaver along with the trader revolted, began refusing loan, closing down their workshop and taking to agriculture labor. Gomestha, a paid servant called the Gomestha, was appointed for supervising the weaver, collecting, supplying, and examining the quality of the cloth. The company prevented the weaver from the dealing with the other buyer. Once the order was placed, the weaver were given loan for the purchasing raw material for the production. The produced cloth was to be handed over to the Gomestha. The new Gomestha had no social link with the village. They acted arrogantly, marched into village with the sepoy and the peon, and the punished weaver for the delays in the supply. The price received by weaver from the company was miserably low, and the loans that they had accepted tied them to the company. In a Carnatic and Bengal, weaver desert village and migrated, setting up looms to in other villages where they had some family relation. Elsewhere, the weaver along with the village trader revolted, opposing the company and its officials. Plight to weaver. The East India Company gained monopoly right over the Indian textile trade. It tried to eliminate the existing trader and broke connected with the cloth trade and established direct control over the weaver. A paid servant called the Gomestha was appointed for the supervising weaver, collecting supply and examining the quality of the cloth. The company prevented the weaver from the dealing with the other buyers. Once the order was placed, the weaver were given loan for the purchasing raw material for the production. The produced cloth was to be handed over to the Gomestha. The new Gomestha had no social link with the village. They acted arrogantly, marched into village with the sepoy and the peon, and punished weaver for delays in the supply. The price received by weaver from the company was miserably low. The loan that they had accepted tied them to the company. In a Carnatic and Bengal, weaver deserted village and migrated, setting up looms in other villages where they with the village trader revolted, opposing the company and its official. Weaver began refusing closing down their workshop and taking to the agriculture labor. Monopoly right. Once the East India Company established the political power, it asserted a monopoly right trade. A new system after establishing monopoly over trade, it proceeded to develop a system of management and control that would eliminate competition, control cost. It did through a series of steps. Appointing Gomestha, the company tried to eliminate the existing trader and broke connected with the cloth weaver. It appointed a paid servant called the Gomestha to supervise the weaver, collect supplies, and examine the quality of the cloth. System of advances. To have a direct control over the weaver, the company started a system of advances. When on the order was placed, the weaver were given loans to purchase the raw material for their production. Those who took loan had to hand over the cloth they produced to the Gomestha. They could not take it to any other trade. Use the power. The place where the weaver refused to cooperate, the company used its police. At many places, weaver were often beaten and flows for delays in the supply. While the system of advance proved harmful for the weaver, no chance of bargaining. The weaver lost any chance of bargaining. Leasing of land. Most of the weaver had to lease out the land and devote all their time to weaving. Weaving in effect come to absorb the labor of the entire family. Dependency for the food on other. Most of the weaver after losing their land become the dependent on other for the wood supplies. Clashes with the Gomestha. The new Gomestha were outsider with no long-term social link with the village, so they acted arrogantly, marched into villages with the police and punished weaver for delay in the supply. So there were a report of the clashes between the weaver and the Gomestha. British textile in India. British industrial pressurized the government to impose duties on the cotton textile so that merchants goods could sell in Britain without any outsider competition. The industrialists who pursued the East India Company for selling the British manufacture in India market, export of British cotton good increased dramatically in the early 19th century. The export market of the Indian cotton weaver collapsed and local market strength being glutted and cheap merchant imports. The weaver could not get sufficient supply of good quality raw cotton. Weaver in India was starved of supply and forced to buy raw cotton at exorbitant prices. By the end of the 19th century, factories in India began production, flooding the market with the machine-made goods. Consequently, the weaving industry decayed and died. Manchester come to India. By the beginning of the 19th century, textile export from India declined in 11 to 12. Pieces goods accounted for 33% of the India export. By the 1850, it was no more than the 3%. At the same time, industrialists pursued the East India Company to sell the rices manufactured in Indian market as well. By the 1850, cotton price goods constituted over 13% of the value of Indian input, and by the 1870s, this figure was over percent. Problem faced, theory export market collapsed and the local market shrank, being glutted with the Manchester import. Import goods were could not easily competed with them. By the 1860, weaver could not go sufficient supply of raw cotton of the quality. As the raw cotton export from the India increased, the prices of a cotton shop, weaver in India were spared of the supplies and forced to buy raw cotton at the exorbitant prices. Okay, and by the beginning of the 19th century, there were a long decline of the textile export from India. Development of cotton industry in England. As the cotton industry developed in England, the industry group began worrying about the import from the other countries. They pursued the government to impose import duty on the cotton textile so that merchant goods could sell in Britain without facing any competition from the outside. Growth of mills and the falling demand with the growing mill and falling home demand, British industrial pursued the East India Company to sell British manufacture in India market as well. Two as policy to sell its manufacture in India. East India Company followed a two as policy, that is no taxes, no import, high taxes on export. Manchester goods in India, cotton weaver and the small producer in India thus faced two problems at the same time. The export market collapsed and the local market shrank, being glutted with the Manchester import produced by machine at lower cost. The import cotton goods were so cheap that weaver could not easily compete with them. Shortage of raw material. By the 1860s, weavers faced a problem. They could not get sufficient supply of raw cotton of the goods quality. When American Civil War broke out, the cotton supplies from the US were cut off. Britain turned to India as raw exports from India increased. The prices of raw cotton shot up. Weaver in India were starved of supply and forced to buy raw cotton at the exorbitant price. In this situation, we could play. What are the factories in India? 1815, first cotton mill came up in Bombay. 1855, the first jute mill came up in another one. In 1862, 1860s, the alien mill was started in Kanpur. 1861, the first cotton mill of the Ahmedabad was set up. 74 में हुआ. The first spinning and the weaving mill of the Madras began production. The first cotton mill in Bombay came up in 1864. By the 62, four mill were at 19,400 spindles and 2150 looms. Around the same time, jute mills come up in Bengal, first being set up in 1855. In North India, the alien mill was started in Kanpur in the 60s, and a year later, as the first cotton mill of Ahmedabad was set up. In the 74, the first spinning and the weaving mill of Madras began production. Currently, entrepreneurs, the British in India began exporting opium to China, or tea from China to England. Many Indian practitioners in India trade, providing finance, procuring supplies, and shipping consignment in Bengal. Dwarkanath Tagore made his fortune in the China trade and established 6 joint stock companies in 1830 to 40 in Bombay, Dansha, Petit, and Jamshedji Nurmanji Tata built a huge industrial empire in India. They accumulated their initial wealth partially from the export to China and partially from the raw cotton shipment to England. Merchant from Madras traded with the Burma, Middle East, and East Africa. Other trading activity include carry goods from one place to another place, banking, trading funds between the city and the financial leaders. However, Indian traders were barred from trading with Europe in the manufactured goods and had to export raw material and the food grain required by the trade also gradually adds out of the shipping business. And from the late 18th century, British India began exporting opium to China. Many Indians become a junior player in the trade, providing finance, procuring supplies, and shipping consignment. Having earned through trade, moving earned through trade, some of these businessmen has the vision of developing industrial enterprise in India, Bengal, Dwarkanath, and Tagore have 6 joint stock companies in 1830s and 1840s in Bombay, Paris, like Dinsha, Petite, and Jamshedji Nusarwanji. Tata built a huge industrial company in Seth Hukumchand set the first jute mill in Kolkata in 1817, and so did the father of as well as grandfather of the famous industrial builder. With this, I stop this lecture at here. In the next video, we will study about further something in this chapter. अगर आपको ये वीडियो पसंद आए तो वीडियो को लाइक कर दीजिए, चैनल पर नए आए तो सब्सक्राइब बटन को प्रेस कर दीजिए ताकि आने वाले वीडियो की नोटिफिकेशंस टाइम पे मिलती रहे. वन मोर, अगर आपको ये वीडियो अगर आप सब्जेक्ट से रिलेटेड कैटेगरी होता है कमेंट बॉक्स में पूछ सकते हैं. थैंक्स फॉर वाचिंग द वीडियो.